Welcome to the Daily Insider here on Vegas Insider. I am Kevin Rogers as we get set for today's edition here on Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. Losing track of the days. But we'll review the Rams 49ers debacle last night. I guess debacle from the LA side. San Francisco played very well, and now they've beaten LA 5 straight times. Alex Smart, NFL handicapper, Vegas Insider. He will join us. He is second in units on Vegas Insider this season, coming off another winning weekend. So we'll talk to Alex coming up in just a moment. But before we get to Alex, let's talk about BetMGM. And they are the king of sports books. New players only, a great deal. Bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. That's right, bet on any NFL money line. And if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. New players only, must be 21 years or older to participate. Also legal in the following betting states: Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. only. Full terms and conditions apply. That is BetMGM. They are the king of sports books. So let's get started with Alex Smart, who joins us here on the Daily Insider. Alex coming off a 2-1 Week 10. He is 34-21-2 this year, nearly 62%, almost 11 units. Alex, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good to see you, Kevin. How's everything?
Good. We are doing well here. And let's look back at, before we go back to Sunday's action, your thoughts on last night and what we saw. The 49ers just rip up the Rams 31-10. They got Odell Beckham Jr., no impact. They got Von Miller, no impact. And San Francisco, who was 0-4 at home, they finally came through with a big win.
Well, they've had a couple of bad weeks in a row. And, this could happen to any team. We all have ups and downs, as human beings, as teams, and maybe the chemistry was thrown off a little bit with some of the new faces in the lineup last night. But, going against Tennessee previous to that sort of beats you up a little bit. That's a very physical Tennessee team. So am I surprised? I'm a little bit surprised, but am I surprised at the score? Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really surprised.
Yeah, and we've seen this a lot, Alex. It feels like over the last month or so with all of these upsets. And granted, San Francisco was a 3.5-point dog. It wasn't a massive underdog, but they just got blown out by Arizona last week without Kyler Murray, without DeAndre Hopkins. And just your thoughts on all of these upsets, or I guess unexpected results, we can say. We saw Jacksonville beat Buffalo. We've seen the Jets beat the Bengals, Washington over Tampa Bay. Just that this league, it feels like, Alex, that upsets, it's not crazy because the talent isn't obviously the same like in college where you have Alabama against an FCS school. There's no way they're losing to them. But here it feels like now are the lower tier teams catching up? Is that what you think?
Possibly. We've used this in many, many sports before, and parity seems like to be a major concept among, professional sports teams. And, with all the money out there and all the talent that you can see across all leagues, not just the NFL, I think we're going to see more and more of this kind of thing coming forward. And the lines makers for us, from our perspective anyway, are, what's the old saying? There's an old saying about the book doesn't beat the player. This is a Jimmy the Greek saying. It's we beat ourselves. So, that's what we're going into. We're going into like this league parity across the board in all leagues. And then on top of that, it's up to us to try to find the small edges that are available for us.
Yeah, and listen, it feels like you can't count anybody out in the NFL, and when to pick the spots. Jacksonville beats Buffalo 2 weeks ago. Then they hang with Indianapolis. They cover in that game. I want to talk about a few of the games that you had on Sunday, and one of them, you and I were actually on the same side in this game. The Eagles, they beat the Broncos handily, 30-13. It closed at a pick. You got it early, +3. I thought, Alex, that Denver just had to have the letdown after beating Dallas. Philly's been really up and down this year. But what did you like about the Eagles on Sunday?
We like to make a big deal out of winning streaks and things of that nature. So, the Denver had won a couple of games in a row, but if you looked at the stats battles that they've gone through, I think they've lost 5 of their last 7 games, stats-wise, if I'm not mistaken. they're just not a team that just rings a bell with me. It wasn't that Philadelphia is anything amazing, and they still have a lot of growing to do. But, that's the way I looked at the game. I just thought the line was a little bit off. And you're right. The letdown was absolutely, in the making. And that's exactly what we saw.
And another game that you had too, Alex, that, again, you and I were on the same side. That's why I guess we did so well this weekend, was this was a little more, this one came out of the end. But New Orleans, they end up losing to Tennessee, but they covered. They got a late touchdown. And even though Alvin Kamara didn't play, that was one concern I had, still backing New Orleans. But I looked at it like Tennessee had won all these games as a dog. Maybe here is the letdown in a sense. Is that the way you felt with this game?
Absolutely. I mean, they played some top tier teams and they've come across with some very close wins. And I mean, if you watch some of these games, they're very physical. So, to me, after 4 or 5 straight games like this, I'm looking forward here. I want to see what the lines makers are going to do going forward with Tennessee. This is a very interesting situation. Either they're going to burn themselves out before we get to the end of the season, or they're going to have a bit of a letdown for a couple of games, which will prepare them for a better playoffs. That's just my humble opinion on that.
And also with Tennessee too, Alex, that they get Houston this week, who we know is a bottom feeder, excuse the term, but maybe this is the time when they really stub their toe against the Houston team that has not been playing well. You say, okay, now Tennessee looks like the best team in the AFC, that this could be the time that maybe they have a tough game.
Yeah, absolutely. And where this line moves is the most important factor for me. Are they going to take it? Is this going to be a de facto bye week for Tennessee? And do we see them just sort of go through the motions after the first half? It's going to be very interesting. I really think they're beat up. I feel that. And, not so much going through the injury list, but just what they've been through.
Now, taking a look at this week, Alex, and Thursday night, Patriots and the Falcons, that number's up to 6.5, even 7 at some places. It's so interesting because New England's 4-0 on the road this year. Atlanta hasn't won a home game. For some reason, Alex, in this new building, they're just not good. I don't know what it is about the Mercedes-Benz Stadium where the Falcons haven't performed well. We know Atlanta is always a Jekyll and Hyde team, and this is a playoff or a Super Bowl rematch from a few years ago. Brady's gone and some of the big names are gone. But with New England, they've been so good recently. It feels like they've turned the corner. Do you think it continues here, or Atlanta, after the bad performance against Dallas, maybe they could keep this one close?
Well, anything is a possibility in the NFL. Like we just said, with parity, the inconsistencies of certain teams, injuries. Of course, there's so many variables here. And you look at a Thursday night game, and after being completely annihilated, is Atlanta. Pros don't like to be embarrassed. That was embarrassing. What happened to them against Dallas, and are they going to bounce back here? It will be interesting. And once again, for me, it's the line that matters, not whether Atlanta can be competitive, but it's the line. So I guess that's my answer on that one.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It really is. And we saw last week where the Ravens, much better than the Dolphins, laying 7.5. There's always the quarterback situation. Dolphins beat them. Where this one, New England has played well recently. You're like, wow, they're laying a touchdown on the road. That it says that it is definitely a tough game to handicap and see whether or not Atlanta can bounce back from as bad as they played on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not 100% sold on New England yet. Kind of a little shocked last week what they did to Cleveland. Belichick is obviously the greatest coach in the game, to me anyway. But, does the personnel really afford us, laying a touchdown on the road?
Yeah, and that one's very tough, and we'll see what happens coming up on Thursday night in Atlanta. Now, as far as the NBA goes, Alex, only 3 games in the league tonight. What's been your impression so far through the first, we've gone 3 weeks of the season? Cleveland has been a surprise. Washington's been a surprise. What's kind of stuck out to you so far in the NBA?
I'm not in such a surprising manner, but that Golden State seems like they're back on track again, whether it's the health of the team or whether it's just, whether it's really the talent base. What sort of stuck out at the very beginning of the season, though, was Brooklyn and their inability to have any chemistry despite of all their talent. all of a sudden that's changed now too. So that's going to be a very interesting game tonight. Golden State and Brooklyn. Very, very interesting.
Do you have any leans on that game tonight?
Actually, I have a premium selection on that game tonight, so I do have a lean. But once again, whether we profit or we don't, which I feel strongly we will, it's a game I think that will sort of set up an East-West scenario going forward and understanding where most of these teams stand. Anyway, from a power ranking.
Yeah, and Kevin Durant playing his old team, and Steph Curry has been unbelievable with this Golden State team. They're coming off that loss to Charlotte off the long homestand they had, and again, these teams are going to stumble every so often, but should be interesting to see what Brooklyn does. I want to throw another game at you tonight, the 76ers Jazz matchup, where Utah's off this ugly loss to the Heat, and they had that Pacer loss where they had that fracas at the end. Philadelphia is dealing with the COVID stuff with Joel Embiid, and still Ben Simmons isn't playing. You think it's just too many points here for Utah to lay? I mean, they've lost a few in a row, but Philadelphia stumbled as well.
They've been rocking at home this year, the Jazz, and the 76ers are extremely inconsistent, have been for a long time. Doesn't matter if Embiid or Simmons or whoever's in the lineup. This team is completely very inconsistent. And, you just, for me anyway, you just roll your dice and you go with what you good is a good number. Like if somebody thinks double digits here is too much for the Jazz, I don't think it is. Whether I lay the money on the 76ers, that's a totally different story.
Yeah, and it should be interesting to see what Utah does here in this spot where they're off 2 losses to the Eastern Conference teams to Indiana and Miami, and now they get Philadelphia again coming up tonight. Alex Smart, you could check out his work at Vegas Insider. He's having a great NFL season. He's number 2 in units, coming off another winning week, and Alex will have more picks coming up for Week 11 in the NFL. Alex, we appreciate the time as always. Thanks a lot. Best of luck, and we'll talk to you soon.
Always, Kevin. Take care.
All right, there is Alex Smart, and check out his picks at Vegas Insider. And always enjoy talking to Alex. He has a lot of good insight there. And look, he and I were on the same side on that, on both those games, on 2 of them, the Eagles and the Saints this past week. And New Orleans back to recover, but we'll take it. So you can't win every game by blowout. You got to get a couple, going your way. Now, I want to tell you about DraftKings and the championship series that is going on now. You can be the GOAT. You can. You see the GOAT right there. He's wearing the crown. You could score your seat to the Tournament of Champions. Now, it's very easy. Go to DraftKings.com, and you can check out the schedule, how to play, and the king of competitions. That's what it's called. The DraftKings Championship Series is the ultimate competition of contest winners from daily fantasy sports, sportsbook, and casino. The one and only place you can compete in the king of competitions. The best of the best in each domain will compete for series supremacy in their own domain's Tournament of Champions. They'll have one goal in mind: win the ultimate crown and earn the title of the greatest of all time. That's right, the GOAT. And you could be that. Just go to DraftKings.com for more details. Check it out now at DraftKings. Now, let's take a look at the action coming up tonight in the NBA. I know we just hit on it with Alex, but let's continue it. Warriors and Nets. All right. So you have in this game tonight Kevin Durant facing off with his former team. And yes, he wasn't with Golden State for a long time. Let's not make it out to be like Steph Curry, who was with Golden State forever. So when you look at what Durant did, he won a championship with Golden State. Now he's in Brooklyn trying to get the Nets to the finals. And a lot of star power tonight at Barclays Center with Steph, 11-2 Warriors, Nets at 10-4, KD, Harden, Kyrie still not playing. But Golden State, they went on that long homestand, and they ended up winning the final 7 games. They blew out the Bulls in the final game. And I know they didn't beat some great teams during that homestand. So, I mean, again, we don't want to dog them for that. But Minnesota, Atlanta's been bad on the road. Houston's not good. New Orleans isn't good. Oklahoma City, young. Charlotte has been up and down. And then they just lost to Charlotte a few nights ago, 106-102. So they're laying 5.5 there, a couple unders the last 2 games for the Warriors. Steph has still been great. Like that, you can't take away. But Brooklyn now, They're coming home off a 6-game road trip. They went 5-1. And yeah, Brooklyn didn't beat great competition. Oklahoma City, New Orleans, Orlando, Detroit. Nice win at Toronto, and they got blown out at Chicago. So Brooklyn, they've kind of cleaned up against garbage. But again, that's what's on the schedule. Brooklyn's already won at Philadelphia earlier this season. They haven't played the Knicks yet. And Brooklyn's also got a home loss to Miami. So both these teams kind of trying to show that they can get a good win. Now, Golden State did beat the Lakers in the opener. They did beat the Clippers already. So they have some good wins already at the front. It's just been this stretch now that they haven't played great teams. But Brooklyn last year, though, Golden State went there. Remember the first game of the season, 125-99. The Nets beat the Warriors, and the Nets beat them in Oakland, or in San Francisco, rather, at Chase Center, 134-117. So Brooklyn won both matchups last year, and now this time around, the Nets laying 3.5, total of 221.5 at BetMGM. So the second game of the night is only 3 games. The 76ers face the Jazz, and both these teams not really playing well at the moment. Utah's 8-5, Philadelphia's 8-6. Now, Joel Embiid, he is still sidelined. Danny Green is out. There's just a lot of and Simmons, I mean, we say it every game. He's not coming back anytime soon. But Philadelphia went on that nice winning streak, and they've lost 4 in a row. 3 at home, 1 on the road at Indiana. And just to show you what Embiid has meant, 3 of those games, they were underdogs, Philadelphia. So it's not like they're getting upset necessarily. They lost to the Knicks. They were totally cleaned out as far as a roster. Milwaukee, Indiana, all's a dog. They lost to Toronto at home as a favorite. Okay, fine. So now Utah, they've dropped 4 or 5 all of a sudden. Utah was playing well. They blew out Atlanta on the road. They go to Miami, lose by 3. They blow a big lead at Orlando, lose by 7. They beat Atlanta at home. Then they lose to Indiana as 10.5-point favorites by 11. That was the game with the Rudy Gobert, Miles Turner fight at the end. And then Utah lost to Miami by 6, but the Heat were up big in that game. Jazz came back and made it interesting. But you're laying 9, 10.5, 11 in the last 3 losses for Utah. So now you're laying a big number again against Philadelphia, who is continuing this road trip. They go to Denver, they go to Portland, they go to Sacramento, all coming up. And Philly's got to get their stuff together. But again, they're without their best players, so they get a little bit of leeway there. Now, the third game tonight, the Spurs and the Clippers out in LA. And San Antonio is at 4-9. Spurs actually came back on Sunday against the Lakers. They were down 2 with about 2 minutes to go, and then the Lakers went on a run at the end to win by 8. Spurs were getting 2 in that game. They've lost their last 2 games. They only have 4 wins in the season. They beat Orlando twice, Sacramento, and they upset Milwaukee. So the Spurs, understandably, aren't the team they were from years past. No more DeMar DeRozan, no more LaMarcus Aldridge. So a lot of the star power gone from San Antonio. It's a young team that Pop has now. The Clippers were on a really nice run. They won 7 straight. And they are continuing their homestand. Actually, the final game of their homestand, they beat Charlotte, Portland, Miami, Minnesota, then lost to Chicago by 10. So now they get the Spurs. Last year, road team went 3-0. Clippers won 2 in San Antonio. Spurs won in LA. But you also had Kawhi in for some of those games against his former team. He's obviously sidelined. But LA, the good thing about them is they had a slow start. They've come back to life at 8-5. They're 6-3 at Staples. Spurs are 2-5 so far on the road this season. And if, in case you missed it last night in the NBA, some of the highlights or lowlights, whatever you want to call it, the Pelicans, they ended up blowing a 17-point halftime lead against Washington, getting 4.5. They lost by 5. They lose 105-100 to the Pelicans lose 105-100 to Washington. And the Wizards, another cover for them. Bradley Beal didn't play, but massive comeback there. And that game stayed under the total. Also, Indiana, who has played better total dud in the fourth quarter last night. They got outscored by New York 23-10 in the fourth quarter. So the Knicks, a much-needed win for them at the Garden, 92-84. Atlanta won again at home over Orlando. The Cavaliers didn't cover for the first time in a while. They've been great against the number. They rallied from 19 down to beat Boston Saturday. They couldn't do it last night. Boston ended up beating Cleveland 98-92, so they got a split of that little two-game set. Sacramento jumped on Detroit. They were up 19 after 1, up 24 at the half. They won by 22, so the Kings bounced back after they lost a few in a row. Dallas ended up rallying past Denver, 111-101. They covers 5.5-point favorites, and the Mavs were down double digits at the half, and they come back and win. Luka got hurt at the end of that game, ankle injury. We'll see how long that keeps him out for. Impressive win for Memphis. They beat Houston 136-102. They were laying 11.5. Memphis was on a 4-7 run after starting 2-0, and they had 2 of those wins in overtime. They won another game by 2, but Houston's just been awful. And the Rockets aren't a good team. It's simple as that. And Memphis, that was a get-right game for them. Memphis put up 33, 41, 31, 31 last night in the fourth quarters. So they just torched Houston last night. Phoenix holds off Minnesota 99-96. So the Timberwolves get the cover as 4-point dogs. Suns missed a few free throws at the end. The Heat, without Jimmy Butler, without Bam Adebayo, they beat Oklahoma City 103-90. They cover 6.5-point favorites. Oklahoma City, who had been playing well, they ended up losing last night. Damian Lillard was back for Portland. They come back and beat Toronto 118-113. So the Blazers, very easy book on them. They're great at home. They're terrible on the road, even though they just won at Houston a few nights ago. And a good one for the Bulls at Staples to beat the Lakers 121-103. LeBron's still out. Anthony Davis got ejected, but Chicago, look, Billy Donovan's a very good coach, and it helps when you have DeMar DeRozan in there. And along with Zach LaVine, the Alex Caruso revenge game, I guess we can call it, last night at Staples Center after coming over to the Bulls from the Lakers in the offseason. But that was the NBA last night. You have a couple MAC games this evening in college football. Western Michigan is at Eastern Michigan. And Western laying 5.5 there. Both teams at 6-4. Important game for those two. Toledo laying 7 at Ohio. We'll see what the Bobcats do. They've been competitive here in these midweek Maction games. And Bowling Green getting 17 at Miami of Ohio. So the MAC getting all of these Tuesday and Wednesday games right now, getting the spotlight. College basketball, there's so many games tonight, but one of them, just want to tell you about this line move. Houston now laying 5.5 against Virginia. And Virginia lost their opener to Navy. Houston struggled in their opener against Hofstra. Houston is now 2-0. Virginia, they're 1-1. But several good games tonight. You have that. St. Louis at Memphis. A couple former Conference USA teams meeting up there. Penny's Tigers at 2-0. They're laying 10.5 against the Billikens. Also, that's an interesting game, too. Creighton and Nebraska. Creighton, they've struggled the first 2 games. And they lost all their starters from last year. They're 2-0. Nebraska at 1-1. The Cornhuskers laying 3.5 at home. And Creighton destroyed Nebraska last year. Again, different team. But the other big game, you have Seton Hall in Michigan. That's the Gavitt games, the Big East versus the Big Ten. Michigan laying 8.5 against Seton Hall. That's that, 1989 national championship rematch? Again, not relevant for this, but just to throw that out there. Last night you had Marquette beat Illinois. So Shaka Smart's off to a good start at Marquette. And, just a lot of college basketball tonight. And hockey, you have a bunch of games as well. Panthers, Islanders is the final, I believe it's the final game of New York's long road trip to start the season, as they lost to Tampa Bay last night. Panthers have dropped 4 in a row, so they're trying to get back on track. Edmonton and Winnipeg, a good game. That's basically a pick-em. That's a playoff rematch from last year. Winnipeg swept Edmonton. Washington and Anaheim. Anaheim's won 7 straight. The Capitals have been on fire, too, so that's a really good matchup. Also, Carolina goes out to Vegas to face the Golden Knights. So a lot of action tonight around the NBA. College basketball, NHL, college football, we got everything. But just want to put this one out there before we step aside. We talked about this with Alex Smart earlier. But this game last night, the 49ers over the Rams, 31-10. A lot of people would have looked at last night's game and say San Francisco, 0-4 at home, they're going to lose to LA. The 49ers lost to Green Bay, Seattle, Indianapolis, and Arizona. Green Bay is the best team in the NFC right now. Could say maybe the NFL. Arizona's pretty good. We'll give them a mulligan for the Carolina game. No Murray, no Hopkins. Seattle has struggled. Fine. Indianapolis has played better. They were favored all four of those games. Now they face the Rams. Rams off a bad Sunday night loss to Tennessee. So the Rams have to come back. They have Odell Beckham. They have Von Miller. And the Rams, who have been playing so well, stubbed their toe against Tennessee. They're going to come back and beat San Francisco. But now that's the fifth consecutive win for the 49ers over the Rams. So Kyle Shanahan has figured out Sean McVay somehow. And San Francisco had not been a home dog this year. So you're getting points with San Francisco in this scenario against an LA team that really wasn't very sharp. San Francisco rolled them. Garoppolo played well. Deebo Samuel, a couple of touchdowns in that game. And this is what the NFL is now. And everyone wants to have this opinion that it's so incredibly difficult to bet on. Every sport is difficult to bet on. There's not one sport that's easy. And I think with the NFL, when you see all these years, the parity, however you want to use the term, that it shouldn't be that crazy to think that a team like the 49ers, who were in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, they had a bunch of injuries last year, that they can't play this way. Jacksonville beating Buffalo as 16-point dogs is one thing. Even the Jets as 11.5-point dogs against the Bengals is another. But the 49ers, they can hang with the Rams. Everyone talking about this NFC West as being competitive from top to bottom. What's interesting is it's not the most competitive division at all in the NFL, not compared to the AFC North or even the AFC West this year. But just look at those numbers. San Francisco, you're getting points with them as a home dog against LA after they were favored all those times. Just something to keep an eye on for future reference. That look at the numbers and see, what are they telling you? And the 49ers blew out the Rams last night. Before we get out of here, we want to tell you about our friends at BetMGM. They're the king of sports books. New players only. Bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. That's right. Bet on any NFL money line, and if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. You must be 21 years or older to play, and it's legal in the following following legal betting states: Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. only. Full terms and conditions apply. That's BetMGM. They are the king of sports books. I am Kevin Rogers. My thanks to Alex Smart for hopping on for a few minutes to talk some NFL and NBA. And we'll have plenty more tomorrow on another edition of the Daily Insider. And don't forget to check out the Bet and Collect podcast as well. My conversation with former odds maker Dave Sharapan, looking back at Week 10 in the NFL. You can find that on our podcast page at Vegas Insider, or on Spotify, Spreaker, Apple Play, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. Bet and Collect podcasts. Like, subscribe, do all of that, and you'll get new episodes twice a week. So you can check that out as well. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for watching this edition of the Daily Insider. We'll be back with you tomorrow at noon Eastern. And as always, best of luck with your bets.